Hello and welcome to another episode of Great Women in Compliance with Hema Lomax and Lisa Fine, produced by the Compliance Podcast Network and sponsored by Corporate Compliance Insights. You are in for a royal treat today with our special guest, my friend, veteran legal and compliance expert, and head of global legal compliance at social media giant TikTok, Catherine Razzano. Catherine has very kindly agreed to allow me to shower her with questions about her thoughts on all things compliance and life in general for the benefit of you, our listeners. Catherine, I am so thrilled to have you join us today. Thank you for being here and welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast.
Thank you so much, Hema. It is an absolute pleasure.
I always love sitting down and chatting with you, but let's kick it off, if I may, with you telling us a bit about yourself, your origin story in your own words, maybe who you are and what brought you to the tech startup life.
So I've been practicing for about 23 years, did not have any intention of becoming a quote compliance lawyer or a compliance professional. I think like many before me, I was going to be a litigator and do kind of corporate litigation and transactional work. And wow, that was incredibly boring. I learned that early on. And I was actually quite fortunate to be mentored really by a wonderful partner at my first law firm. And like any good associate, I was working on a Saturday in the office and she just came in and said, get on a phone call with me. I'm bringing in a new client. I said, hi, my name's Catherine. She's, yep, we'll get to that later. And really, that's how this beautiful relationship with compliance work, white collar work, FCPA, export control, sanctions really started for me was just being in the office on a Saturday afternoon and having the great opportunity to become part of this case, this FCPA case, which at the time was enormous, although by today's standards, probably not so much, but it was the Lockheed Martin Titan Corporation acquisition, which ultimately fell apart because of FCPA violations on the part of Titan Corporation. And like I said, it just started a beautiful journey. She continued to mentor me and sponsor me. And I switched firms with her and she just continued to teach me. And I really felt, okay, I'm passionate about this work. This is fun. Maybe this is actually why I went to law school. And yeah, so I just had the great opportunity to do that throughout my legal practice. And around 2010, I had my second child. And I was really questioning whether I wanted to stay on this partnership track or if maybe I wanted to do something different. Lo and behold, during my second maternity leave, a recruiter called and said, would you have any interest in going in-house on doing FCPA and white collar work, compliance work for a large defense contractor? And I waxed and waned a bit, but ultimately I took the leap of faith and said, yes, got the gig and haven't looked back 15 years later. I'm on my third company and I love being in-house. I love being with the client and solving problems versus running in at the end when the companies need the help the most.
Catherine, that's such a common theme that very few of us wanted to be a compliance officer when we were little and didn't even maybe know about the compliance profession until much later. And maybe you were a victim of your success in a way. You were the partner track, you were well on your way, very successful in private practice. How have you found in-house practice to be different from private practice?
Complete 180. I think that's been one of the hardest parts of my journey along the way is making that transition from big law firm, moving into more of that business partner relationship and developing trusted relationships, seeing problems before they start, trying to solve them before they become big, much bigger issues or bet the company type of issues. And I will say that took me about a year or two to really make that complete transition from big law to in-house and really understand how a company operated, how different functions operated separately, but also how to work cross-functionally, that you were there not because you were some great legal mind, but you were there to support the business. You were there to ensure that shareholders were getting what they pay for, essentially, as a return on their investment. It's a completely different train of thinking in my mind.
I agree completely. And I don't know about you, but I've learned so much coming in-house that I wish I knew when I was an outside.
Yes.
And so,
Yes. All the time. I say
yeah.
that all the time. I'd be so much more valuable now, I think, in big law than I was when I was there.
I agree with you. Why are you saying that for our listeners to understand?
Because we know how companies work, we know how companies think, we understand what it takes to get things done. It doesn't just come from a big lawyer saying, you must do this. You have to get multifunctional teams on board. They have to buy in. You have to get teams set up. You have to have operationalism. They need to implement these potentially new controls or something of it. And then you have to test them and make sure they work and be willing to tinker. And it's just not as easy when you're sitting in the big law firm in New York or DC or wherever it might be and saying, oh, you should definitely do this because this is what's going to help you the most, or this is what's going to get you out of trouble. Most in-house lawyers are sitting on the other side on a phone call. Okay, thanks for the advice. You have no idea what it's going to take for me to get all of that done on the inside, which is why I think a lot of lawyers are very successful in leaving in-house and transitioning into big law because they have that experience. They have that know-how that if you've only practiced in a law firm, you may not necessarily have.
Agree. Totally eye-opening for me as well, in just terms of what you need when you're on the inside and what you're looking for from your professional counsel. Catherine, you have worked at some big household names. I know you've been at General Dynamics, Panasonic, and TikTok now. I wanted to ask you a few questions about what is it like to work under a monitorship? Because I know when you were at Panasonic, you were helping manage the monitorship there. And that's a very unique space in the compliance world. Not all of our listeners will have been under a monitorship. Some of them will maybe in the future have to do.
Mhm. Yeah.
What's that experience like? And again, what advice have you got for our listeners who might be having to manage a monitorship?
I would say go in eyes wide open. I wanted to be a part of that work stream. I was elated to have led the company through the monitorship when I was at Panasonic Avionics. It was a lot of work, no doubt. I think the most important part about that monitorship or any monitorship is the same skill that you use to be successful as an in-house lawyer, which is relationship building and trust building. We had some very good counsel at the very beginning of that monitorship, and they stressed the importance of relationship building and trust building with the monitor team on day one. And it was extremely good advice because it set the tone for the rest of the monitorship period where we could have open and honest and transparent discussions with each other between myself and my team and the monitor team and have some of those, again, some of those robust kind of negotiation type discussions about what the company really could do and could not do. And that's because of the trust that we built from the very, very beginning. I think monitorships oftentimes become rocky because they start rocky. And some lawyers or company officers feel like it's similar to litigation. It is not. You are not litigating, you are not defending, you are very much obviously representing the company, but you really do need to follow the lead of the monitor, heed the advice of your compliance counsel. And it's a little bit of a dance. You're going to sashay left, you're going to sashay right. Sometimes you're going to do a twirl in the middle, but it is certainly not akin to litigation.
Look, it's hard enough, isn't it, to manage a team, to manage up with your board and your executives, to manage the employee, the workforce. And now you've got almost another boss in the monitor. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the Department of Justice, right?
right.
I mean, they are a very keen voice throughout the process. They offer the ability for both the company and the monitor to have a place where they can voice concerns or express gratitude and recognition. And I think they're an important part of that calculus that needs to be considered throughout.
I understand what you mean. No one wishes the monitorship on anyone, but it is a uniquely exciting place to be as a compliance officer.
Oh, the Super Bowl. That's why I took the job at Panasonic. I told people this is the Super Bowl of compliance
Oh,
because of
why is that?
because of the experience. It's all
Right.
about experience.
The experience, I'm assuming also that there's resources and willpower now. People will actually get behind the function in a way that they might not if you're trying to be proactive and prevent.
Yes. Yeah, it's a game changer. Trying to build or enhance a program without that carrot is very different. And it's exactly what you just said. You're going to have to fight for resources. You're going to have to make business justifications for headcount and tools and buy-in from business leaders on why this is important. Those are not necessarily conversations you have to have. It's like you get to skip over that part and just move and just keep going and moving forward during the monitorship. Whereas when it's business as usual, you've got to get through phase one before you get to phase two.
I'm sure there were many challenges in your leadership there. What did you learn as a leader when you were at Panasonic under a monitorship?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think one of the most important things that became very obvious to me very quickly was that there was no way the monitorship would be successful without the support of the business function. And I'm not talking just about tone from the top. We had tone from the top, bar none. But it's getting like the middle managers and the middle level leaders to understand it and want to prioritize it and really be participant in it. And I think that is something that we were able to achieve very early on, because we had the tone from the top, but also I think myself and my team really were very good advocates for explaining the why and leaving the monitorship out. Everyone knew the monitorship was there. We didn't need to explain that to people, but explaining to them why it would be important long term and understanding the return on investment they would have longer term than the monitorship really resonated, I think, with many of our business leaders that got their teams to really participate in the implementation of some of the controls that we had to put together.
Catherine, that's so smart because obviously the monitorship will end some point in short
Mhm.
order, but you're looking for building a sustainable compliance programs. Don't come back before a monitor ever again.
That was the goal. And the team there and we talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about the monitorship being our reason for existence, but it couldn't be that forever. And it was not going to be the reason that we'd get things done. So we did really talk about that a lot. And the team that I worked with there was very senior, very sophisticated, knew exactly what needed to be done. I think that we were able to really rally around that rhetoric with the business and move pretty quickly.
So, hot of your successes at Panasonic, I believe you were headhunted to join a little known startup, social media giant now, TikTok, which I think at the time had just or was just about to overtake Instagram as the most popular social media
Yeah. Yeah.
application. Tell us about that transition. You're in manufacturing, you're in defense, and then you all of a sudden, TikTok's calling.
I know, it's crazy. I actually had to ask my teenage son to give me a lesson on TikTok after talking to some of the recruiters. I'm like, wow, I better get educated on this pretty fast. But truthfully, I really have always had an interest in the tech space. I find it absolutely fascinating. I think it's akin to pharma 20, 30 years ago, where there was like some regulation, but not a lot, or telecom. And I just felt like it was a place that was interesting. It was a place I wanted to be. It was a place I was scared of and made me a little bit uncomfortable because it's not really like my thing. And all of those reasons appealed to me, including the fact that my kids are Gen Z and their whole lives have been essentially online. They are going to continue to live online and live in social media. And I felt as a parent, I super, super need to get up to speed and learn more about this industry, learn more about what makes it tick and how I can make good impact for like my kids as well as future generation. And so I thought it was, and my kids thought it was super cool. But yeah,
I know that feeling. When I joined Snapchat, my children were very much the same. They're like, mummy's at the place with the funny filters.
yeah,
But you're right. It's a very unique vantage point being a mother of children that are about to, if they're not already, be immersed in this technology. And feeling,
hmm
I don't know about you, but feeling some sense of responsibility, not just to my children, but to all children to make sure we
yeah,
were doing our part to help the company with their existing goals of responsible business, responsible growth.
yes.
I agree with you. That's super exciting. And as I said, TikTok took off massively. It's also been very much under the spotlight recently in the media. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you lead, how you bring your leadership chops to leading a team under that kind of intense scrutiny and pressure.
Yeah, I feel for the past 7 years, I've been leading and working with teams under stress during the monitorship. We had the pandemic as well during the monitorship. And of course, now TikTok's all over the news. I'm sure everyone has seen. But I don't think there's any difference between the way that I manage in times of, let's say, peace and in times of war. I really try to always just be myself, be authentic to who I am and my values, and really just try to lead with vulnerability and really use mom gene a little bit. I tell my team when I'm tired. I tell my team when I need a break. I tell my team how wonderful it is to go on vacation and spend time with family and friends, and that work, while invigorating but also stressful, is not our whole personage. That we're many different people to many different factions. And work is just one of them. And we need to feed our souls and feed our other buckets of life so that they don't wither like plants. I think during stressful periods, and at least I can tell you now in this experience with my team of almost 40, that is resonating very well. Because when you do have moments of stress or uncertainty or instability, sometimes it's nice to hear not just the Rosh Kumbah, we're going to get through this, but sometimes feeling, okay, the person that's leading this team is telling me the truth, is telling me their honest opinion, is expressing things in a way that feels human. And I think that's really important, at least for my team right now.
You showing up in that way, so authentic, vulnerable, honest, I think is creating that much sought after psychological safety that we know we need as leaders for our team.
Mhm.
But it strikes me, Catherine, again, in our roles, in your position as leading an ethics and compliance function, you are somewhat responsible for the whole company's culture, not just your team. Yeah, maybe that feels intimidating, but there's something we can do there in terms of promoting that culture of psychological safety across all of your management teams. And I wonder if you were able to do it so well with your team that hopefully has a cascading effect. What's been your experience?
I hope so. I certainly hope so. We have a large legal team here at TikTok, and I absolutely think that it does cascade through our legal team. A lot of my peers do talk to me about how they should run a certain meeting given what's going on, and seek me out for counsel and see me as a role model, which I'm very humbled by those sentiments. And I'm more than happy to help in any way, because regardless of whether you're on my team or on the litigation team or on the privacy team, I still care about you and I still care about the future of their careers and their growth. So anything I can do to help. Culture is a very interesting thing in the tech world though. And it's agnostic of TikTok. And I know you've been at Snap. They have many friends who've been at Meta and Google and other places. And it's almost like there's many cultures sometimes within the company. That I would say the culture in the legal team is amazing. But I don't know that translates all the time into other functions, and that can be at odds with one another. But what I try to tell my team is that's okay, right? We are who we are. We have our mission statement. We have our charter. We lead with our values and integrity. So we're going to continue to do that regardless of whether other teams buy into that or not. But that's how we are going to do it in the global legal compliance. We have professional ethics, and we're gonna continue to do all of that. So I think that's what keeps my team going through some of the harder times, is knowing that we do have a purpose. We have our mission. It has never changed since the day I arrived, and we all really feel very close to it. And we support each other, and they know ultimately I will have their back.
Well, you should be very proud of that, because it's very easy to say you want to unify people around values, but very much more a challenge to do it in practice. Pat yourself on the back, Catherine.
Well, it's a everyday struggle. I think compliance lawyers, and it's interesting, 'cause many of my colleagues say this to me all the time, is we really do have the hardest job in the company, but for the individuals that are creating and innovating, which is extremely hard and challenging. I'm glad that's not my job. But I think compliance lawyers, compliance professionals, HR professionals, ethics professionals, it is a very challenging and daunting role, because we are oftentimes brought questions and issues that are so in the gray that it feels like an enormous weight for us to be bearing that and trying to manage that on our own. Of course, many of us are paid for our judgment, and I think that's important. But knowing that you have people around you that will support you in whatever decision you make, whether it ends up working out or not, is, I think, the key to that value building and that trust that makes the teams be okay with understanding the weight of some of the decisions they're making every day.
Yeah, but I want to stay with the theme of cultures. And you mentioned there's microcultures in tech, the behemoth that is tech, but you're also at the same time a multicultural global
Mhm.
organization. And so, how have you found building global culture in a multicultural company?
Yeah, again, agnostic of TikTok, I've always worked in an international environment. The companies I represented in private practice were typically not US companies. General Dynamics was a global company, Panasonic, a Japanese company, but with a very global presence, and now TikTok. I think it is challenging to develop culture in those multiculturalism world, but I think there's a couple things that are true of all cultures. One is listening. People like to be heard. People want you to ask them questions, and you need to listen and listen very closely about what they are saying and what they are not saying. Trust. Everyone wants to feel like they have that trusted relationship between the people they're talking with. In some cultures, that happens very quickly and you can quickly move along. In other cultures, it takes a long time to build that trust, and you need to be patient and just be self aware that patience could take some time. And then I think third is just compromise. And that's part of that compromise is a little bit risk tolerance and what's the risk tolerance and culture of the company. But compromise meaning it's not your way or the highway, whether it be on the compliance or the legal side or on the business side. Really, again, listening, developing that trust, and then understanding that maybe there are other ways to solve whatever you're looking for. It's probably not going to be exactly what you want, Mr. or Mrs. Business person. It's definitely not going to be exactly what I want, compliance person. But there's a way. There's a way through that. And using those listening skills and using that relationship of trust is usually what gets you through that thread. And I think that's true of whether you're working in the United States, Europe, Latin America, Timbuktu, wherever. I think human nature just demands that.
It's such wisdom. And I love that. You're so right. Human nature demands that. And it makes me feel like that big task of reaching out globally is not out of reach, right? It is possible.
Mhm.
Principles that you said, trust, patience, compromise. Those are sage powers superpower you have that you can then deploy for the good. And again,
Yeah. I don't know if they're sage powers. They are practiced on the daily. And I am a woman of faith. So I do pray for those things often, but I just think they're common threads.
yes, common threads, and then you're looking for that common ground. One of the things I'm always very focused on, I've worked with companies that are headquartered in the US with global reach. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, it's very important for us to think outside the US headquartered box. Just the fact that the FCPA is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, there's some thought that has to go there because what's foreign, what's international now? How have you handled that in your experiences? You work for a Japanese company, you work for companies that are headquartered in various different places. What's been your approach to making sure you use a common language that doesn't alienate or distance anyone in the team?
I try not to focus on statutes. I try not to focus on specific regulations, but common core, common law type topics. Bribery is bad. Being a criminal is bad. Being truthful and ethical, that's good. And I know that sounds so simple, but they are very common, right? I think most people, wherever you are, knows that stealing is a bad thing, right? Or that utilizing someone's trust in a way that could hurt them or impugn them or someone they know is a bad thing. Just focusing more on values rather than the rules of this statute or the rules of this regulation is just much more powerful because people can resonate with that. It's interesting. The more I've done this over the decades, Anytime you say criminal, they're like, what did you say? I don't want to have anything to do with that word. And you're like, of course you don't, because that's bad. But if you say Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, we need to be in compliance with Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, first going to be like, what does that mean? Why do I care? Is that wrong? Again, I think many compliance, I'm by no means like the first person to talk about this, but I think many compliance professionals talk about rules-based versus values-based compliance policies and codes. And I am totally on board with that because it's just so much more relatable. And at the end of the day, this is really about people's behaviors, not necessarily about how we comply with rule 1, 2, 3, XYZ.
I mean, again, I'm hearing in you, as you explain it, that you see that you're actually serving the employees, you're serving the workforce rather than serving
Yes,
laws or statutes or the governments behind it. So even through the
100%.
monitoring and the DOJ looking over the monitor, you understand clearly who it is you're serving in the company. And I think that makes all the difference.
100%. And that was part of our mission statement at Panasonic. It continues to be a part of global legal compliance's mission statement at TikTok is that obviously we're there to serve and the company and the interests of the various shareholders, but also you, the employee. And frankly, we can't do it without the employees. Everything we do is irrelevant if you can't get the employees to really get behind it.
So true. Catherine, let's pivot back a little bit to your career path. I don't want to skim over it. I mentioned in passing that you'd been in the defense manufacturing and then you've moved into tech. And I know one thing that many of our listeners are thinking about when they do career transitions is how do they justify moving from one industry to another? Do they not need to have experience to get that next job in that particular industry? So could you talk to me a little bit about that and how you were able to seamlessly navigate through various industries so swiftly?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to leave General Dynamics, and it's not because I didn't love it. It was a great company, really enjoyed my colleagues there, good work. But I had a conversation with someone at a conference and they referred to me as a government contracts lawyer. Huh. I was like, no, I'm not a government contracts lawyer. I don't even do government contracts. Oh, you've been there for 7 years. You must know everything about government contracts. You're like, no, thing about government contracts. And then someone else referred to me as an aviation lawyer. I'm like, I'm not an aviation lawyer. So it began to resonate with me a bit. Maybe I'm here so long that I'm becoming something that people don't, but something that people think that I am that I'm really not. And to me, I've always just been a general white collar lawyer. Put me in any industry and I can help you figure it out because I can learn the industry, but I have the experience on this side. And that's the match made in heaven. So obviously being offered the opportunity at Panasonic, somewhat similar in that it was the avionics business unit, somewhat similar in that they have government contracts, but really at the core, the business is an innovation company and they build things, consumer electronics and in-flight entertainment systems. But again, I learned the business but I brought the experience. And I think on the tech side, truthfully, again, I had interviewed with other tech companies and there was definitely a hesitance. They were like, oh, you've never been in tech. I don't think you understand how things operate around here. And TikTok, new company, startup, new legal team. I think there was willingness to forego quote experience in the industry for experience in the subject matters that really needed attention. And again, I do personally think, and obviously recruited people for the past 15 years for various jobs. I want your experience. I feel like anyone that is smart and eager and willing to learn can learn all that stuff, but you got to come with the experience of how to implement these controls, design these controls, understand the laws and the rationale and the principles behind them. That's to me the gold. You can learn the business. That's what law firm partners and law firm lawyers and consultants do all the time. They learn the business, but they're there to help you on the expert side.
That's what makes it so much fun almost, isn't it? The ability to dig deep
Yeah.
in different industries and different companies. And I would say even in tech, no two tech companies are the same. There's almost a danger that you go in thinking and then
Mhm.
don't come in curious and seeking to understand the business that you actually are serving today.
I absolutely agree. Again, newbie to tech, have learned so much while being here, but have definitely seen folks kind of cycle in from other tech companies. And sometimes that ends up being a little bit of an Achilles heel is, oh, I've been at this other company and this is how they do it. And that doesn't sometimes always translate.
I also really liked your positioning there of I'm a white collar lawyer, or I'm a lawyer with legal skills. Like we don't have
Mhm.
to always position ourselves with the brand, the industry that we're going into. I think that could be really helpful, especially for people that are looking for their next opportunity. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. I know I'm asking you these questions to help our listeners because I know that one of the things you prize is being a mentor in the profession. Mentoring is important to you. In fact, I was listening to another podcast you did, I think, with Modern Counsel. You said, if I may quote you, you said, other women poured into me, and I wanted to do the same for those just starting out. By sharing my good and bad experiences authentically, I hope to demonstrate how others can build and shape the career that's right for them. I love that quote, Catherine. It's the epitome of you and how generous you are. But let me ask you to talk about your experience with mentoring others, women in the compliance community, and why that's so important to you.
Because we need it. Because sponsorship and mentorship matters. There, there's a reason why people ask about mentorship and sponsorship at conferences and having ERG groups and things like that. It's because people desperately want it, particularly post pandemic, where we're still working in, many of us are still working in hybrid environments. There may not be as many opportunities to network. And I feel so grateful and appreciative of some of the women and men that supported me throughout my career and in good ways and in bad ways. And I want to be able to give that back because I really do think my career has been shaped primarily by some of the advice and experiences and observations that I've made along the way. And without that, and without the ability to have those conversations with people, I don't know. I don't know if I would have made the same choices. And then what? Then where would I? And I just think it's fun. And again, it's maybe the mom in me too. Is we're talking about our future. It's not just my future. It's the future of the next generation. It's the future for my kids and my nieces and my nephews. And we really could use leadership right now. We're a quarter into the 21st century. And so far, it's been a little bit rocky. So it'd be nice to see the next quarter century be more of an uplift. In 25 years, my oldest son is going to be 42 years old, which is in my age range. So I feel very compelled to be a part of that process for his generation and the millennials and all of that, because they really are the ones that are going to bring us over the line.
So true and so sobering. I think for us
I know I'm very old. I never thought I'd be this old, but alas, here we are.
That's okay. That's okay. You're leaving a fine legacy, Catherine. And again, you just sticking with the mentoring. I think one of the things I see, I have this myself, is oftentimes we get to a point in our career where we may feel stuck or we may feel that we're not sure in terms of direction. This is a beautiful career. I love our jobs, but also it's quite up and down, right? And like you said,
Yeah.
day it's a monitor, the next day there's no support for compliance. We've seen a lot of reorganizations and layoffs in the industry over the last couple of.
Yeah.
So what advice have you got to others, our listeners, who may be feeling stuck and may need to rethink how their career path and how they're leaning in when it comes to the compliance community?
I would say don't be afraid of trying something different. Don't get wrapped around the axle of title, compensation, where you thought you were going to be at age X when you were age Y. And I believe me, I've been having these own conversations myself for many years. And I think if you want to take another step, if you want to do something different, what you should be doing is following your passion, trying to understand what your passion is, what really makes you tick. And maybe it is title and money, then go with that angle. But if your passion or what makes you tick is leadership or mentorship, or you get bored, you learn this industry, it's been 5 years, you want to do something else, use that as your jumping off point, use that as your catalyst. Everything else can be negotiated. But I think just being true to yourself and not getting wrapped around the axle of, oh, I thought I was going to be here by the time I was X age. Put those notions aside and just think about what makes you tick, what makes you get up in the morning every day, breathe and feel like I got this. And it's going to be different for everybody. There are different motivators for everybody. And that's a part of just understanding what those motivators are for you or for people that you're leading or people that you're working with.
I really like the way you're redefining ambition almost. Like ambition should be fulfilling your passion. It shouldn't be titles or someone else's career path or a ladder that's set
Right.
up for you. And we know that those vary vastly in our profession. It's really important, I think, as you said, to find your passion and to and as you even as you described, positioning yourself as a white collar lawyer. That's what you like to do. That's what you care
Mhm.
about. It doesn't matter what your title is, what your level is, or even what company you're at. If you are doing the thing you love, that's really important. Ah, so inspiring. Thank you, Catherine. You mentioned that we're in the second quarter of this century. Can't believe that. 2025, the beginning of the second quarter. What is on your mind beyond serving the community, which you do so beautifully? What is on your mind as you enter the second quarter of this century? And that could be personal, professional, open forum.
Gosh, so much. I'm at an age where, again, I want to do things my way. I want to do them in a way that is true to me and my values. I really want to make sure that I'm spending time intentionally, whether it be at work or at home, family, dogs, that kind of stuff. Just being a little bit of not the person I was in my 20s and 30s, which was super career oriented, super driven and motivated by different passions. Yeah, I feel like I'm in that precipice of where I'm like, you know what, I've done a lot and I'm really happy and I'm going to continue to do the things that make me happy.
Amen. Sign me up. I want to do much more to say. That's yeah, and that's very again back to
We'll be Hema and Kath. We'll be Hema and Catherine, the new Selma and Louise.
love it.
We won't drive
Maybe
on
I'll
the way.
get ourselves a nice car, but maybe not a
Yeah,
cup of exactly.
yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. And look, back to you said follow your passion, and here we are again talking about being true to our values, being true to ourselves, and maybe sloughing off some of the stuff that we thought was success. But you've been entirely successful, and you've achieved probably beyond your wildest dreams in terms of your professional achievements and your career. But it is nice, isn't it, to think, what's my actual destination and what does fulfillment
Mhm.
for me? So I love that you're looking in that direction. You inspire me to do the same. And no doubt we may be doing the same thing, but doing it with a different attitude in terms of just
Mhm.
really understanding what fulfillment is. So that's really nice. Catherine, I could speak to you for hours, but I wanted to ask you one parting question, if I may, which is let me ask you, have you got any parting thoughts for the Great Women in Compliance community?
I'm just so happy to have been invited. I've followed you and Lisa and Mary for so long on your journeys, and I've always found passion and inspiration from the three of you. So, really happy to be invited, but really happy to have this community, not just the great women in compliance, but just to have the compliance community. I do feel just really warm when I go to conferences and people you haven't seen in a while, or you see something really great happen to someone in need and you're willing to extend your hand. I think it's a great place to be. And I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. And just really so grateful and thankful that you invited me.
It wouldn't be the great community without you, Catherine. We're grateful to you for your leadership, your mentorship, your compassion. You are such an inspiring mentor to me, and I'm really grateful for your friendship. So thank you. And thank you for helping me kick off this 2025, this beginning of the second quarter, so magnificently for Quick. So I'm so grateful that you're my first guest. I'm sure we'll have you back in the future, but thank you again for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your passion with us.
Thank you. Really do appreciate it.